January 16, 1943, where the SS Schenectady rested silently at her berth in Portland, Oregon. She was a brand new Liberty ship, scarcely 10 weeks old, freshly rolled out from the bustling Kaiser shipyards. There was no enemy threat on the horizon. No storm lashed at her hull. The morning air was still, and the water mirrored the calm sky. Then, without the slightest warning, a sharp, jarring crack reverberated across the harbor. In an instant, the vessel split completely in two. The hull fractured from deck to keel, as if cut by some unseen, ruthless blade. Sailors scrambled in panic as the bow and stern sagged apart in opposite directions, the ship's back broken while still tethered safely to the pier. The Schenectady was far from unique. That same winter, the SS John P. Gaines disintegrated in placid waters, while the SSSO Manhattan, a T-2 tanker built under identical methods, cracked so violently that her crew abandoned her in sheer terror. Between 1943 and 1944, over 2,500 Liberty ships reported severe structural failures, hulls riddled with cracks, decks splitting, catastrophic breaks. At least 19 ships fractured entirely in half. 3 vanished into the ocean without a trace, breaking apart so swiftly that no distress call could be sent. These were not casualties of war. They were vessels seemingly committing suicide. The United States had staked everything on the Liberty ship program. Following Pearl Harbor, America had plunged into total war and urgently needed cargo vessels, hundreds of them, quickly. Traditional shipbuilding methods required 8 months per ship, a delay the Maritime Commission could not afford. Enter Henry Kaiser, an industrialist who had never built a ship before, offering a bold promise: mass-produced freighters, assembled like automobiles on an assembly line, completed in weeks instead of months. At his Richmond, California shipyards, Kaiser pioneered revolutionary methods. Welding replaced riveting, prefabricated sections replaced laborious piece-by-piece assembly. Assembly line logistics, inspired by Detroit's car factories, were applied to shipbuilding. By late 1942, Kaiser's shipyards were launching Liberty ships in an average of just 42 days. Propaganda eagerly celebrated this industrial marvel. Newsreels depicted Rosie the Riveters, though in reality, they were welders transforming steel plates into seaworthy vessels at staggering speeds. The SS Robert E. Perry even set a record in November 1942, constructed in just 4 days and 15 hours from keel laying to launch, igniting public amazement. At last, Allied shipping tonnage, devastated by relentless U-boat wolf packs, received a lifeline pouring into the Atlantic. Yet soon, the miracle of speed became a nightmare. Ships began failing, not due to torpedoes, not because of storms, but spontaneously and catastrophically in calm waters that should have posed no threat. Naval architects were at a loss. The welds appeared flawless. The steel met specifications. Designs were adapted from proven British templates. And yet, Liberty ships fractured like delicate porcelain. Cracks usually appeared at sharp corners, hatch openings, gun mounts, areas of concentrated stress exacerbated by the squared-off hull design. Once a fissure started, it raced through welded plates at alarming speed, sometimes tearing the length of the ship in mere seconds. The Maritime Commission launched emergency investigations. Metallurgists examined failed steel under microscopes. Engineers scrutinized stress calculations. Naval inspectors crawled through hulls with measuring tools. The search was on. Faulty steel, defective welds, flawed design, inadequate quality control. Something had to be responsible. Meanwhile, ships kept breaking, even as committees debated, and sailors grew fearful of the very decks they walked, aware that the hull beneath could unzip at any moment in the cold Atlantic. The industrial miracle of mass production had transformed into a maritime terror, and the cause remained elusive. The answer came from the most unexpected source: a welder on the assembly line who dared to question what the engineers dictated. Bessie Hamill worked the graveyard shift at Kaiser's Richmond Yard No. 3, one of thousands of women who had joined the shipyards while men were overseas. She had been welding hull sections for 8 months, long enough to notice a detail that engineers seemed to overlook. Night after night, she observed her team welding massive steel plates in sequences that defied logic. Hamill noticed welders starting at edges and working inward, or running long seams from one end to the other without regard for the resulting stress. As each weld cooled, the steel contracted, pulling and warping the plates. She could watch the tension build, observe the distortion forming under her torch. When welders finished one section and moved on, the stress was locked permanently into the structure. It was akin to tightening the center bolts on a car wheel before securing the outer ones, a recipe for imbalance and eventual failure. Her foreman dismissed her concerns. After all, she was a welder, not an engineer. The construction sequence came from the engineering department, from men with naval architecture training and college degrees. But Hamill persisted. In November 1943, she requested a meeting with yard supervisors, breaking the chain of command and risking dismissal. She brought test plates she had welded on her own time using alternative sequences. Some displayed severe warping and visible stress patterns. Others, welded from the center outward in a calculated manner, remained flat and true. The supervisors were skeptical, yet intrigued. One agreed to observe the production line during Hamill's shift. What he witnessed confirmed her fears. Welders were torturing the steel, forcing it to endure stresses it would carry for the entirety of its service life. Each cooling weld created residual tension, and the sequence of assembly meant that these stresses accumulated and concentrated at critical points, particularly the corners of hatch openings and other high-stress areas. When these ships entered the frigid North Atlantic waters, the steel's brittleness combined with locked-in stress to create the ideal conditions for catastrophic failure. Hamill's discovery was surprisingly straightforward, yet profound. She realized welders should start from the center of each steel section and work outward, allowing tension to spread gradually rather than accumulate in the middle. By alternating welding points, they could prevent dangerous heat buildup in one area. Long, continuous welds were hazardous. Instead, sections needed a balanced sequence that evenly distributed cooling stresses. These were not abstract metallurgical theories, but practical insights from someone who worked directly with the metal, feeling its response beneath her torch. By December 1943, her observations reached Henry Kaiser. He faced a critical decision. The Liberty ship program was already under congressional scrutiny due to rampant cracking. Acknowledging that welding sequence, rather than steel quality or weld integrity, was the root cause meant admitting that every ship built so far had systematic flaws. Production would need to slow to retrain thousands of welders, and the assembly process would require redesign. Yet, solving this could prevent further catastrophic fractures threatening the entire maritime logistics network. Kaiser did not hesitate. He authorized immediate testing of Hamill's methods, removing a full hull section from production for experimental reconstruction. Metallurgists and engineers who had spent months studying failed ships now followed the instructions of a night shift welder with no formal engineering education. The results were both damning and revolutionary. Comparisons between conventional and Hamill-sequenced hull sections revealed dramatic differences. Stress gauges showed that traditional welds held internal tensions exceeding 30,000 pounds per square inch at critical points. Hamill's sequences dispersed these stresses across broader areas, peaking at just 12,000 psi. The steel and welds were chemically identical. Only the order of operations had changed. Yet structural integrity improved beyond engineers' expectations. The physics became clear. steel is dynamic, reacting to heat and cold. Welding generates temperatures exceeding 2,500 degrees F, causing metal to expand dramatically. As it cools, contraction is constrained by surrounding cold steel, producing permanent residual stress unless the sequence allows redistribution. Liberty ships suffered brittle fracture propagation. The carbon steel in their hulls was fine in warm waters, but in the near-freezing North Atlantic it lost ductility. Cold steel behaves like glass rather than the tough metal used in California yards. When residual stress concentrated at a sharp corner, such as a hatch edge, a microscopic crack would form. In ductile steel, the crack stops, absorbed by material flexibility. In brittle steel under tension, the crack races through the hull, fueled by stored stress. Sharp corners amplify stress, sometimes tripling it, letting cracks accelerate at extraordinary speeds before bulkheads or frames can stop them. The SS Skenktedy's fracture is understandable in retrospect. Built in early winter, welded in sequences that maximized residual stress, her hull carried tens of millions of pounds of locked-in tension. When temperatures fell to 28 degrees F, the steel became brittle, and stress at a hatch corner initiated a crack that raced through continuously welded deck plates. With no rivets or stress relief mechanisms, the fracture consumed the ship in seconds, releasing decades of stored energy in one catastrophic failure. Riveted ships did not suffer this problem. Their plates are discrete, and cracks often stop at riveted seams, which act as natural crack arresters. Welded ships, however, are continuous. A crack in one plate can travel unimpeded for hundreds of feet. The very efficiency that made welded ships faster to build also made them uniquely vulnerable. The Liberty ship's squared-off design worsened this issue, as hard corners specified by British architects for cargo loading served as stress concentrators, setting the stage for these dramatic failures. Nobody realized that sharp internal corners in the Liberty ships created dangerous stress concentrations that could magnify the loads imposed by every wave, current and swell by enormous factors. Each time the hull flexed in the ocean, these corners acted as conduits for stress spikes, channeling energy directly into weak points. When combined with the residual stresses locked in by rapid welding and the brittle nature of cold steel, these corners became perfect crack initiation sites, waiting for a triggering condition to set off catastrophic failure. Henry Kaiser grasped the gravity of the situation and understood what the test results meant, not just for his shipbuilding empire but for the Allied war effort as a whole. In January 1944, he made a daring decision that could either cement his industrial achievements or brand him a reckless profiteer, sending thousands of sailors to their deaths on defective vessels. He ordered an immediate halt to Liberty ship production at Richmond Yard 2 and redirected the yard's immense resources toward creating an entirely new class of ship, the Victory ship. This was no simple modification. It was a complete reimagining of the vessel, incorporating Bessie Hamill's revolutionary welding observations alongside the hard-earned lessons documented from fractured hulls across the Atlantic and Pacific. The stakes were immense. Liberty ships were still critically needed, with over 2,000 Allied merchant vessels lost to U-boats since 1939, and the upcoming European invasion, still months away, demanded the most massive amphibious supply operation in history. Every ship counted. Kaiser was betting everything: that Hamill's sequenced welding system could be implemented, that hulls could be redesigned to eliminate stress concentrations, that steel could be upgraded to withstand cold water brittleness, and that production speeds could remain remarkably high despite these comprehensive changes. His competitors believed he had lost his mind, and congressional investigators were ready to pounce if delays occurred. Kaiser's engineers methodically analyzed the failure points and reworked the designs from the ground up. Every square corner of the original Liberty ship design was replaced with smooth, rounded transitions. Hatch openings that had spawned so many fractures were redesigned with generous curves to reduce stress multipliers and prevent cracks from forming. Deck and hull plate thicknesses were recalculated, not merely to increase strength but to ensure that stress distributed in harmony with the new welding sequences. Structural frames were repositioned to align with natural stress relief paths instead of working against them. Even the steel itself was re-engineered. Kaiser's metallurgists formulated a new alloy with improved low-temperature toughness, slightly reducing carbon content while increasing manganese levels. Tiny additions of nickel, a costly and rationed element, were justified scientifically, as 0.25% nickel significantly enhanced resistance to brittle fracture. The Maritime Commission initially balked at the expense, but Kaiser's calculations demonstrated that preventing just one ship loss would offset the cost of the upgraded steel for 50 vessels. In March 1944, the new steel specifications were officially approved. Following this, a massive effort began to retrain the workforce. Richmond shipyards employed over 90,000 workers, many of whom had only recently completed brief crash courses to learn welding basics. These workers now had to master the complexities of sequence welding, stress relief techniques, and thermal management, all essential to ensuring the structural integrity of the new Victory ships while keeping production on an accelerated wartime schedule. Kaiser established dedicated welding schools across the shipyards, pulling experienced welders like Hamill off the production lines to train new crews in precise techniques. Each welder received a numbered sequence card for every hull section, ensuring each weld was executed in exact order. Weld 1 here, weld 2 there, strictly following the prescribed sequence. The prefabrication system expanded enormously. Instead of attempting to weld massive sections directly on the ways, where sequencing was difficult to control, Victory ships were divided into smaller, manageable modules built in specialized workshops. A single bow section could contain 50 separate prefabricated assemblies, each welded under controlled conditions, following optimal sequences, and then stress-relieved in ovens before final assembly. This modular approach allowed welders to consistently work from the center outward, just as Hamill had demonstrated, without the complications of full hull assembly. Skeptics voiced doubts when the first Victory ship keel was laid in February 1944. Construction took 18 days, longer than Liberty ship records, prompting critics to claim that quality and speed were mutually exclusive. Kaiser paid little attention to the criticism, focusing on crack inspection reports instead. Astonishingly, the first 2 Victory ships exhibited 0 stress cracks, none at all. By April 1944, Richmond Yard 2 had evolved into a precisely orchestrated dance of steel, fire, and human coordination unlike anything seen 2 years earlier. The yard resembled a massive assembly plant, with distinct fabrication zones feeding a central area where hulls rapidly took shape. Borrowing from Henry Ford's moving assembly line idea, teams rotated through stationary stations in timed intervals instead of moving the product itself. Work began in the prefabrication sheds, large covered spaces where welders assembled hull sections no larger than 30 feet across. Each section had a detailed sequence card. A bottom plate might require 47 welds, numbered and color-coded. Welders began at the geometric center and worked outward in spiral or radial patterns, while supervisors patrolled the floor with checklists to prevent skipped steps. After every 10 welds, the sections were placed in stress relief ovens, heated to 2100 degree and slowly cooled. This annealing process allowed the steel's crystalline structure to relax, dissipating residual stresses before they could accumulate to dangerous levels. The steel arrived pre-cut and pre-formed from mills specially calibrated for Victory ship production. Unlike Liberty ships, where plates were cut and shaped on site, Victory ship components were ready for immediate assembly. Curved bow sections pre-formed, deck plates pre-drilled for alignment, and frame sections pre-welded. This controlled preparation reduced variables and ensured consistency across thousands of components. Assembly on the ways followed a new method. Rather than building from the keel upward, Victory ships were assembled in large modules almost simultaneously. Engine rooms, cargo holds, bow and stern sections were constructed in parallel, then lifted by massive gantry cranes and precisely positioned together. On May 12, 1944, Yard 2 executed its most ambitious assembly. 17 major modules, comprising 85% of a hull, were aligned and placed in just 11 hours. Welders then connected these modules using center-outward sequences, joining stress-relieved sections rather than stressed ones. The 5-day construction schedule became possible through meticulous planning. Night shifts staged materials for the following day. Specialized teams continuously monitored alignment and weld quality, and mobile cranes delivered components according to strict 5-minute schedules, ensuring the entire process proceeded flawlessly and efficiently. Welders operated in strict rotations, spending 30 minutes at the torch followed by 10-minute breaks to reduce fatigue and maintain high-quality work throughout long shifts. Kaiser introduced the critical path management system, monitoring each task to identify potential bottlenecks and ensure that other work could proceed simultaneously. When frame installation moved ahead of schedule but pipe fitting lagged, workers were reassigned immediately to balance progress across all stages. Every delay and deviation was meticulously logged and analyzed. Daily morning meetings reviewed the prior day's performance and implemented solutions before minor issues escalated into serious problems. A major milestone occurred on June 27, 1944, when the SS Benjamin Warner, Hull 23, was completed from keel laying to sea trials in just 5 days and 11 hours. This was a fully equipped combat-ready cargo ship, with defensive armaments, full electrical systems, an operational engine room, and every weld executed according to the newly developed stress relief protocols. The ship had no cracks, and inspections confirmed that stress levels were within safe limits. During her shakedown cruise, the Warner performed flawlessly, even under conditions that would have fractured earlier Liberty ships. This rapid construction demonstrated not just speed, but a complete rethinking of how complex ships could be built, integrating sound engineering principles with practical assembly methods. Hamill's observations had triggered a systemic transformation in shipbuilding, resulting in Victory ships that were fundamentally different from their Liberty predecessors. Though similar in appearance, their differences extended from the molecular composition of the steel to every design and assembly detail. Liberty ships had been temporary stopgaps. Victory ships were carefully engineered to address all known failure modes, learned from sailors' experiences on fractured hulls in the Atlantic. The steel was improved with a killed alloy containing aluminum to remove oxygen, enhancing toughness at low temperatures. Tests showed the ductile to brittle transition temperature dropped from 40°F in Liberty steel to approximately 5°, allowing Victory hulls to remain flexible where Liberty ships would crack. The 8% per ton cost increase was offset by the enormous performance gains. Every structural detail incorporated lessons on stress concentration and crack propagation. Rounded hatch corners reduced local stress by over 60%, and stress multipliers at corners decreased from 3.5 to 4 in Liberty ships to below 1.8 in Victory ships. Hull plates featured crack arrestor designs, including strategically placed riveted seams that intentionally interrupted continuous welds to prevent cracks from spreading. Critical frames were doubled, creating redundant load paths so that if one frame failed, adjacent frames could carry the load, allowing damaged ships to limp safely to port. Hamill's welding sequences were codified into extensive manuals covering weld order and thermal management. Welders monitored interpass temperatures and paused work when the steel exceeded 400 degrees, preventing cumulative heat buildup that had warped Liberty ship hulls. Quality control became rigorous, using magnetic particle inspection to detect microscopic cracks, ultrasonic testing for internal weld integrity, and X-rays to verify critical welds. Ships were not launched until every weld met strict specifications. Initially, nearly 15% of welds failed inspection, but crews quickly mastered the procedures, ensuring consistent, reliable ship construction. By mid-1944, the rejection rates for welds had fallen below 3%, a clear indication of the effectiveness of training programs and the precision of new construction protocols. The results of these improvements became evident once the ships were in service. From June 1944 until the war ended in August 1945, a total of 531 Victory ships were launched, none of which suffered catastrophic hull failures. Minor cracks appeared on a small number of vessels, but these were caught early through inspections and repaired using the same stress relief welding techniques, allowing the ships to return safely to duty. The difference between Liberty ships and Victory ships was stark and undeniable, measured in lives saved and missions completed that would have otherwise ended in tragedy. For instance, in April 1945, the SS Wandafuka struck a mine off Okinawa, tearing a 20-foot hole in her hull below the waterline. The crew anticipated the same catastrophic cracking that had doomed Liberty ships, but the fracture stopped at the first riveted crack arrest seam. The ship made it safely to port, was repaired within 6 days, and returned to service. In contrast, a Liberty ship hit by a similar mine, the SS Richard Hovey, suffered a longitudinal crack over 90 feet long, broke her keel, and sank in just 14 minutes, resulting in the loss of 37 crew members. The reliability of Victory ships was crucial for the Pacific Campaign. By June 1944, American forces were advancing across the Central Pacific toward the Philippines and eventually Japan, each island assault requiring the transport of millions of tons of supplies across vast ocean distances. Liberty ships could undertake these voyages, but their structural weakness forced lighter cargo loads, slower transit speeds to reduce hull stress, and constant anxiety about potential catastrophic failure far from rescue. Victory ships, however, carried full loads at their design speed of 15 knots, 3 knots faster than Liberty ships, navigating through typhoon-prone waters without fear of sudden hull fractures. The statistics speak volumes. From D-Day in June 1944 to VJ Day in August 1945, Victory ships transported over 18 million tons of cargo without a single structural failure. They operated in North Atlantic convoys where water temperatures frequently fell below 35 degrees, conditions that had previously fractured numerous Liberty ships. They also sailed Arctic routes to Murmansk, delivering Lend-Lease supplies to the Soviet Union, where freezing seawater had made Liberty ships dangerously vulnerable. The SS Hobart Baker completed 17 Murmansk runs without a single stress crack, while the Liberty ship John Walker suffered cracks on only its second voyage and had to be permanently withdrawn from Arctic service. Crew morale improved significantly as sailors transferred from Liberty ships to Victory vessels. Post-war oral histories reveal the mental strain of serving aboard ships prone to sudden fractures, with mariners reporting constant anxiety, particularly in cold weather. Sleep was often difficult, as every groan of the hull could signal impending disaster. Some sailors requested transfers or refused to sail on Liberty ships with known histories of cracking. Victory ships, in contrast, restored confidence, allowing crews to operate the vessels aggressively, knowing the ships could withstand the punishment. This newfound confidence boosted operational effectiveness, allowing faster turnarounds in port, willingness to navigate challenging weather, and bold maneuvering under air attack. The October 1944 Battle of Lake Gulf showcased the Victory ship's combat resilience under conditions that would have destroyed Liberty vessels. 16 Victory ships supported the invasion fleet, transporting ammunition, aviation fuel, and supplies through kamikaze attacks amid typhoon-level seas. The SS Kyle Johnson endured near-miss bomb damage that bent deck plates and cracked three-frame sections, yet continued operations, unloading cargo for 4 days under fire before returning for repairs. Redundant structures and crack arrest features prevented minor damage from turning catastrophic, whereas Liberty ships with similar harm typically had to be abandoned. Economically, the contrast was stark. Liberty ships cost about $2 million each, while Victory ships ranged from $2.6 to $3 million, roughly 30% more. Yet, Liberty ships had a 4.6% chance of catastrophic failure during their service life, with average casualties of 18 crew per incident and cargo losses 3 to 5 times the ship's value. Victory ships, with 0 structural failures, recouped their extra costs within months through reduced risk and lower insurance. By war's end, sailors had a saying: Liberty ships were built by the mile and cut off by the yard. Victory ships were built by the inch and measured by the year. These inches, meticulous welding sequences, rigorous quality control, and engineered crack arresters ensured decades of service instead of anxious prayers at every hull groan. Bessie Hamill returned to civilian life in 1946 with minimal recognition, only a supervisor's commendation. She received no medals, never testified before Congress, and her name did not appear in the technical literature that later documented the welding innovations she inspired. The engineering community adopted her insights, translating them into academic language, presenting them as laboratory discoveries rather than the practical frontline observations of a night shift welder. For decades, welding textbooks instructed students on stress relief sequencing without acknowledging the woman who first identified its critical importance while observing hull plates warp under her torch. Nevertheless, her influence extends throughout modern engineering, far beyond shipbuilding. Today, every welded structure, from towering skyscrapers to extensive pipelines and pressurized vessels, employs sequencing, protocols directly descended from the methods developed at Richmond Shipyard in 1944. The American Welding Society's Structural Welding Code, first published in 1947, formalized center-outward welding sequences and stress relief practices as mandatory standards. In the 1970s, pipeline construction across Alaska explicitly referenced these Victory ship techniques to prevent cold weather cracking in Arctic conditions. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline, 800 miles of welded steel carrying hot oil through sub-zero environments, exists because engineers applied Hamill's lessons. Modern bridge construction also adopted these principles. The tragic collapse of the Point Pleasant Bridge in West Virginia in December 1967, which claimed 46 lives, highlighted how residual welding stresses can contribute to structural failure. Investigations revealed that improperly sequenced welds had locked stress concentrations into critical members. Following the disaster, code revisions mandated the sequencing and inspection procedures pioneered by Victory ships. Every welded bridge built since has incorporated these safeguards, even the Golden Gate Bridge seismic retrofit in the 1990s, which added thousands of tons of welded steel reinforcements. utilized computer-modeled welding sequences designed to minimize residual stresses and ensure structural integrity. Building on Hamill's pioneering hand-welded test plates from 1943, her insights were eventually applied in advanced industrial contexts. The offshore oil sector repeatedly benefited from her lessons. The Alexander Kielland platform disaster in Norway in 1980, which killed 123 workers when it capsized, was partly linked to fatigue cracks from improperly sequenced welds. Similarly, the 1988 Piper Alpha explosion, claiming 167 lives, began with a crack in a welded pipe connection that had accumulated residual stress. Each tragedy prompted thorough investigations into welding procedures, uncovering principles first proven effective in Victory ship construction decades earlier. Today, modern offshore regulations mandate stress relief heat treatments for all critical welds, directly reflecting the ovens Kaiser installed in Richmond's prefabrication shops. Nuclear pressure vessels, containing reactor cores under extreme pressures and temperatures, represent the ultimate application of these stress relief principles. Their massive steel shells cannot tolerate any crack initiation, and welding sequences are meticulously planned using computational simulations to model thermal effects and residual stress. Post-weld heat treatments, analogous to those used on Victory ship sections, eliminate potential failure points. Engineers designing these protocols in the 1950s explicitly referenced Victory ship practices as their foundation. Hamill's observations fundamentally transformed engineering approaches to fabrication. Before Victory ships, design and construction were largely separate. Engineers drafted structures, fabricators built them, and there was little communication about how construction affected performance. Victory ships demonstrated that sequencing in fabrication is as vital as material choice or structural design. Modern engineering education now integrates manufacturing processes into design curricula, teaching that even the most sophisticated design can fail if executed with poor sequencing, while a modest design can succeed with proper procedures. The famous 5-day construction timeline of Victory ships was impressive, but the true achievement lay in prioritizing quality over speed. Kaiser's yards could have maintained Liberty ship pace, producing vessels that looked seaworthy until they catastrophically failed. The real innovation was slowing down to build correctly, guided by a welder's practical insight that challenged conventional engineering assumptions. This principle, listening to frontline workers and adjusting processes based on real observations, became a cornerstone of modern manufacturing methodologies, from Six Sigma to lean production and total quality management. Often, the worker witnessing the process firsthand sees what calculations alone cannot predict. Bessie Hamill died in 1987 in Sacramento, her obituary offering only a brief mention of her service in wartime shipyards. However, her influence endures. Countless welded structures, from Arctic pipelines to high-pressure industrial vessels and expansive bridges, reflect her pioneering stress relief sequencing. Her legacy is a testament to a welder who defied convention and refused to let "that's how it's done" go unchallenged.